The Heart of the Forest, an Enchanted Journey. The beginning. The sky was cloaked in heavy clouds, and the night had fully claimed the forest. The only sound was the wind whispering through the towering trees, its eerie voice weaving through the dense undergrowth. The hunter, Elias, moved cautiously, his breath shallow and quick, eyes darting in every direction. The weight of his bow pressed against his back, but the weapon felt useless in this moment, as though even the sharpest arrow would fail to pierce the impenetrable darkness surrounding him. Elias had been hunting for hours, losing track of time as he followed elusive prey deeper into the forest. But now, the prey was long forgotten. He was lost. The canopy overhead was so thick that not a single star pierced through, and the moon, hidden behind those threatening clouds, offered no guidance. Each step Elias took felt uncertain, as if the earth itself shifted beneath his feet, leading him further into the unknown. His legs ached, his mind heavy with exhaustion, but stopping was not an option. He needed to find his way back to the village before the true dangers of the forest awoke. The air was thick with dampness, the scent of wet earth clinging to him. In the distance, he thought he heard the faint rustle of leaves, the soft snap of a twig. Was something following him? He froze, gripping his knife tightly, listening. But after a long silence, he convinced himself it was just his imagination, spurred by fear. Fear, he realized, was creeping into his heart, entwining with the darkness. Then, as if answering his silent plea, a new sound reached his ears, the distant rush of water. A river. Hope surged within him. If he could find the river, he could follow it downstream, and it would eventually lead him back to familiar ground. He had fished at that river many times as a boy. The thought of its familiar banks gave him a new sense of purpose. He quickened his pace, moving towards the sound, though it still seemed faint and far off. Every step toward the water felt like a small victory, a sign that he was moving in the right direction. The forest, however, seemed to close in around him, the trees crowding tighter, their branches clawing at his clothes like skeletal hands. Elias pushed forward, determination replacing the fear that had gripped him earlier. After what felt like an eternity, the sound of rushing water grew louder, more defined. He could almost feel the moisture in the air. His heart raced, not from fear now, but from anticipation. The river was close. His steps became faster, his movements more assured. The darkness didn't seem as threatening anymore, not with hope as his guide. At last, he broke through the dense foliage, stumbling onto the banks of the river. The water flowed steadily, its current strong but soothing. He knelt beside it, splashing the cold water onto his face, washing away the dirt and fatigue. For a moment, Elias allowed himself to rest, to breathe. He looked upstream and downstream, trying to recall which way would lead him home. The village wasn't far, he told himself. He just needed to follow the river. Soon he would see the familiar landmarks that marked the way. Yet, deep inside, a flicker of doubt remained. The forest was a place of mystery, and many had ventured into its depths, never to return. But Elias wasn't one to give up easily. He had always been guided by an unwavering belief that no matter how dark or lost he felt, there was always a way. The light wasn't what led him tonight, it was hope. And so, with a final glance at the forest behind him, Elias set off along the riverbank, the sound of the rushing water his constant companion as he journeyed deeper into the unknown. Into the depths. The riverbank stretched out before Elias like a winding thread through the heart of the forest, its current a steady murmur against the oppressive silence of the night. The darkness had not lifted, the clouds still blocked out the sky, leaving him with nothing but his instinct and the gentle flow of water to guide him. His legs, weary from the hours of walking, ached with each step, but he refused to stop. Rest would have to wait until he was certain he was on the right path, until he saw some sign of home. The further he walked, the more the forest seemed to shift around him. The trees were no longer the familiar oaks and pines he had known growing up. Their trunks were thicker, their branches twisted, reaching toward the sky like gnarled fingers. A strange mist began to rise from the forest floor, swirling around his ankles and making the ground beneath him feel unstable. It was as if the forest was alive, moving with each breath he took, watching his every move. Elias pushed those thoughts from his mind. He was tired, and the forest had always had a way of playing tricks on the weary. He kept his eyes forward, focused on the river. The water was his guide now, steady, unchanging. If he followed it long enough, he would find the path back to the village. He had to believe that. The sound of the rushing water, which had once been soothing, began to take on a different tone. It was louder now, almost too loud, like a roar in the distance. Elias frowned, slowing his pace. Could there be a waterfall ahead? He didn't remember any waterfalls near the village. But then again, this part of the forest was unfamiliar to him. He had ventured deeper than he ever had before, led by the pursuit of game and now by the promise of survival. As he neared a bend in the river, the roar grew louder still, and soon he could see the source. The river was no longer the calm stream he had first encountered. Ahead of him, the water rushed violently over jagged rocks, crashing into a narrow gorge below. The mist from the falls rose high into the air, mixing with the fog that clung to the trees. It was a sight both awe-inspiring and terrifying. Elias stood at the edge, peering down into the churning water below. Crossing the gorge seemed impossible, the rocks were slick, and the force of the water was enough to sweep him away in an instant. He looked around, searching for another way across, but there was none. The forest on either side was thick with underbrush, and the cliffs on the far side of the river were too steep to climb. A cold realization settled over him. He would have to find another way. The river, which had once been his guide, now seemed like a barrier, blocking his path. His heart sank for a moment, doubt creeping in. But Elias was not one to give up so easily. He had faced challenges before, and he knew that if he allowed fear to control him, he would never make it out of this forest. He turned away from the falls, scanning the trees for a sign, a new path he might follow. The mist clung to the air, making it hard to see, but then, just beyond the trees, he noticed something strange. A faint glow, like the flicker of a distant fire, was visible through the fog. It was small, barely noticeable, but it was enough to make his heart quicken. Was it a campfire? Someone else, lost in the forest like him? Elias hesitated. The thought of encountering another person in these woods should have brought relief, but instead, he felt a chill run down his spine. There was something unnatural about that light, something that made him question whether he should follow it. But then again, what choice did he have? The river was impassable, and he couldn't afford to turn back. With a deep breath, Elias steeled himself and started toward the light, moving cautiously through the trees. As he drew closer, the glow grew brighter, but it wasn't flickering like fire. Instead, it seemed steady, like a lantern. The mist parted slightly, revealing more of the source. To his surprise, he found himself standing at the edge of a small clearing, and in the center of it was an old, decrepit cabin. The cabin was barely standing, its roof sagging under the weight of time, the wood blackened and splintered. But what drew Elias' attention was the light, emanating from within the cabin, shining through the cracks in the walls and the broken windows. It was a soft, warm glow, inviting yet ominous. No one could possibly live here, could they? Elias felt a knot tighten in his chest. His instincts screamed at him to turn back, to walk away and find another path. But curiosity, and perhaps desperation, pulled him forward. He needed answers, and this was the first sign of something, anything, that might lead him closer. The silent cabin. The moment Elias crossed the threshold of the cabin, the air seemed to change. Inside, the silence was heavy, oppressive, as though the outside world had been swallowed by the dense walls of the decrepit structure. His footsteps echoed softly on the wooden floor, which creaked under his weight, threatening to collapse at any moment. The glow, which had seemed warm and inviting from outside, now felt strange and unnatural, casting long, distorted shadows across the room. Elias hesitated, glancing around. The cabin was small, much smaller than it had appeared from the outside. There was little inside apart from a few broken chairs, a table covered in dust, and an old hearth. The fire in the hearth was the source of the light, though it didn't burn like any fire Elias had ever seen. The flames were pale, almost white, and they flickered without heat. It was as though the fire was just an illusion, a faint memory of warmth rather than something real. He moved closer to the hearth, drawn to the odd flames, but a deep unease settled in his stomach. The silence felt unnatural, suffocating. No sounds of the forest could be heard from outside. No wind, no rustling of leaves, nothing but the faint crackling of the eerie fire. Elias knelt beside the hearth, peering into the flames. They danced and shifted in strange patterns, almost hypnotic, as if trying to tell him something. His mind began to drift, thoughts swirling in the quiet. Suddenly, the sound of a soft creak behind him broke the spell. Elias shot to his feet, turning sharply toward the door. It was still ajar, exactly as he had left it. He scanned the room again, nothing had changed. But the feeling of being watched had returned, stronger now. The hairs on the back of his neck stood on end. "Is someone here?" Elias called, his voice breaking the silence. Again, no answer came. He swallowed hard, his pulse quickening. There was something deeply wrong with this place, and his instincts screamed at him to leave, to run as fast as he could back into the woods. But something else, a whisper at the back of his mind, kept him rooted to the spot. It wasn't just curiosity anymore. There was a pull, something drawing him deeper into the mystery, as if the forest itself had led him here for a reason. Elias took a cautious step forward, scanning the room once more. His eyes caught sight of something odd, a large, wooden chest in the corner of the room, half hidden in shadow. It was old and covered in dust, but it seemed out of place in the otherwise empty cabin. He felt that same strange pull again, urging him to investigate. With a deep breath, Elias approached the chest, his hand hovering over the rusted latch. He hesitated for a moment, a sense of foreboding washing over him. But before he could stop himself, his hand moved on its own, unlatching the chest with a soft click. The lid creaked open, and Elias peered inside. At first, it seemed empty. Just darkness. But as his eyes adjusted, he saw something small nestled at the bottom, a bundle of cloth, old and tattered. He carefully lifted it out, feeling its weight in his hands. It was heavier than he expected, and as he unwrapped the cloth, he discovered a small, intricately carved stone, glowing faintly with the same pale light as the fire in the hearth. The stone was smooth, cold to the touch, and etched with strange symbols Elias didn't recognize. As he held it, he felt a strange energy radiating from it, as though it was alive. The room seemed to grow even quieter, if that were possible, and the light from the hearth dimmed slightly. Elias stared at the stone, a sense of unease growing in his chest. What was this thing? And why had it been hidden away in this forgotten cabin? Just as these questions raced through his mind, a low whisper echoed through the room. It was faint, almost imperceptible, but it sent a chill down Elias' spine. He spun around, searching for the source, but there was no one there. The whisper came again, clearer this time, though the words were indecipherable. It seemed to be coming from the walls themselves, or perhaps from the very air around him. Elias' grip tightened on the stone, his heart pounding in his chest. He backed away from the hearth, his instincts finally screaming at him to leave. Whatever was happening here, it was beyond his understanding, and the longer he stayed, the more danger he felt he was in. But as he moved toward the door, something stopped him. The whisper grew louder, more insistent, and the light from the stone flared brighter. It was as if the stone was calling to him, pulling him back toward the center of the room. Elias clenched his jaw, fighting the urge to obey. He had no idea what this stone was, or why it had been hidden here, but every part of him knew that staying any longer would only lead to more trouble. He took another step toward the door, determined to leave. And then, just as he was about to cross the threshold, the door slammed shut with a deafening crash. Elias froze, his heart pounding in his ears. The air in the cabin seemed to grow heavier, thicker, as though something unseen was pressing down on him. The whisper had stopped, replaced by an ominous silence. Slowly, he turned back toward the hearth, his eyes wide with fear. The fire had gone out. In the darkness, the only light came from the stone, glowing faintly in his hand. The cabin felt colder now, more oppressive, and Elias realized with a sinking feeling that he was no longer alone. Something was in the room with him. Echoes in the dark. The darkness in the cabin felt alive, pulsating with a malevolent energy that seemed to press in from all sides. Elias stood motionless, his breath coming in quick, shallow bursts. The stone in his hand was his only source of light, casting eerie shadows that danced across the walls. The fire in the hearth had vanished, leaving the room shrouded in an unsettling blackness. Elias tried to steady his breathing, forcing himself to think clearly. The door had slammed shut, and no matter how hard he pushed against it, it remained firmly closed. The old latch seemed rusted and immovable. He could see no way to open it from the inside. Panic rose within him, but he forced himself to stay calm. He needed to find another way out. He turned his attention back to the stone, examining it more closely. The symbols etched into its surface seemed to glow faintly, shifting and changing as if they were alive. He traced his fingers over the carvings, trying to decipher their meaning, but they remained an enigma. The whispering he had heard earlier had stopped, replaced by an almost deafening silence that seemed to vibrate through the cabin. As Elias held the stone, he noticed something strange. The shadows on the walls seemed to be moving, shifting in a way that suggested they were more than just reflections of the light. He took a hesitant step forward, his eyes scanning the room for any sign of movement. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the occasional creak of the cabin's old wooden beams. Suddenly, a low groan echoed through the room, reverberating off the walls. Elias spun around, his heart racing. The sound was coming from somewhere deep within the cabin, a deep, rumbling noise that seemed to come from the very foundation of the building. It was followed by a series of faint, eerie whispers, too soft to understand but definitely there. Elias's grip on the stone tightened. He began to walk cautiously toward the source of the noise, moving through the darkness with slow, deliberate steps. As he neared the center of the room, the whispers grew louder, their words blending into a continuous murmur. He could feel a strange vibration under his feet, as though the ground beneath him was pulsing with a life of its own. He reached the center of the room and stopped. The vibrations were strongest here, and he could feel them reverberating through the soles of his boots. The whispers were almost clear now, though still indecipherable. The stone's light flickered, casting an eerie glow on the walls. Elias noticed something odd, an indentation in the floor, a small, perfectly circular mark that seemed to glow faintly in the stone's light. Without thinking, he knelt beside the mark and placed the stone in the indentation. As soon as the stone touched the mark, a surge of energy shot through the cabin. The whispers crescendoed into a cacophony, filling the room with a frenzied, almost deafening sound. The walls seemed to ripple and shift, and the shadows grew more pronounced, swirling around him like a living entity. Elias stumbled back, his heart pounding. The stone remained in the indentation, glowing brighter now. The sound and vibrations were overwhelming, and he felt as though the cabin was shaking apart. He had no idea what was happening, but it was clear that the stone was somehow connected to the strange phenomena in the cabin. Desperation clawed at him as he tried to think of a way out. He needed to find a way to stop this madness. He grabbed the stone, pulling it out of the indentation, and the sound and vibrations ceased instantly. The cabin fell into a heavy silence once more, and the shadows and whispers receded. The door remained firmly shut, but the oppressive atmosphere seemed to lift slightly. Elias looked around, disoriented. The cabin was as it had been before, except now there was a faint glow coming from a hidden compartment in the wall that he had not noticed before. The glow was soft, almost inviting. He approached the compartment cautiously, wondering what else this cabin held. He pried open the hidden compartment, revealing a small, leather-bound book. The book was old, its cover cracked and worn. The faint glow emanated from the book, and as Elias opened it, he saw that the pages were filled with strange symbols and illustrations. Some of the symbols matched those on the stone, and others were completely unfamiliar. He flipped through the pages, trying to make sense of the text. The book appeared to be a journal or a grimoire, filled with notes and drawings that seemed to describe rituals and ancient rites. The language was cryptic, but there were enough recognizable symbols and phrases to suggest that it had something to do with the stone and the cabin's strange phenomena. Elias felt a chill as he realized that the book might hold the answers he sought, but it also might contain more dangers. The forest had led him here, and now he was entangled in something far beyond his understanding. He needed to be cautious. He glanced back at the stone, still glowing faintly. It seemed to be waiting, as though it knew something he didn't. Elias took a deep breath and made a decision. He would take the book and the stone with him, hoping they would provide the answers he needed. He had to find a way out of the cabin and continue his journey through the forest. With the book clutched tightly in one hand and the stone in the other, Elias moved back toward the door. He pressed his shoulder against it, bracing himself for another attempt to open it. The stone's light flickered again, casting a strange, almost reassuring glow around him. He pushed with all his strength, and after what felt like an eternity, the door creaked open, revealing the dark forest outside. Elias stepped into the night, feeling a mixture of relief and apprehension. The forest loomed before him, dark and mysterious, but now he had new tools and clues to help him navigate its dangers. He looked back at the cabin, its windows dark and empty, and then turned his gaze to the path ahead. The stone and the book were now his guide, and with them, he hoped to unravel the secrets of the forest and find his way back to the village. But as he walked away from the cabin, the feeling of being watched returned, stronger than ever. The forest was still alive with mystery, and Elias knew that his journey was far from over. Shadows of the past. The forest outside the cabin was just as dense and foreboding as Elias had remembered. The path ahead was cloaked in darkness, with only the faint glow of the stone guiding him. The cabin was now behind him, a dark silhouette against the backdrop of the encroaching night. The sense of foreboding had not left him, if anything, it had grown stronger. As Elias ventured deeper into the woods, the chill of the night seemed to seep into his bones. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves. The stone's glow provided a small, steady source of light, casting long shadows that danced eerily along the forest floor. He held the leather-bound book tightly, its weight a constant reminder of the mysteries it contained. The path was uneven and treacherous, winding through thick underbrush and over gnarled roots. Elias moved slowly, his senses alert for any sign of danger. The forest seemed to close in around him, the trees standing like silent sentinels, their branches clawing at the sky. The whispers from the cabin had left an unsettling echo in his mind, and he couldn't shake the feeling that something, or someone, was following him. As he walked, Elias began to examine the book more closely. The illustrations and symbols inside were unlike anything he had ever seen. The drawings depicted strange rituals and arcane symbols, some of which seemed to match the carvings on the stone. The book mentioned an ancient cult that had once worshipped the forest, performing rites to commune with spirits and gain power. The more he read, the more he realized that the forest was not just a place of danger but also a place steeped in dark history. His thoughts were interrupted by a sudden sound, an odd, rustling noise coming from the bushes nearby. Elias froze, his heart racing. He scanned the darkness, but saw nothing. The rustling stopped, and the silence returned, even more oppressive than before. He took a deep breath and continued, trying to shake off the sense of paranoia that had begun to creep in. After what felt like hours of navigating the dense forest, Elias stumbled upon a small clearing. The area was illuminated by the soft, eerie glow of the stone, revealing a crumbling stone altar in the center of the clearing. The altar was covered in moss and vines, but its surface was still visible, etched with symbols similar to those in the book. The sight of its center shivered down his spine. Elias approached the altar cautiously, his eyes scanning the surrounding area. The clearing was quiet, save for the occasional hoot of an owl and the rustling of leaves in the breeze. The altar seemed to pulsate with a faint, otherworldly energy. He placed the book and the stone on the altar, examining the symbols more closely. The book described rituals performed at such altars, including offerings and invocations to ancient deities. It spoke of the power these rituals could bring, but also warned of the consequences if they were not performed correctly. Elias's fingers traced the symbols on the altar, and he felt a strange sensation, as though the stone was resonating with the altar's energy. Suddenly, the ground beneath the altar began to tremble. Elias stumbled back, his eyes wide with fear. The tremors grew stronger, and the stone on the altar began to glow more intensely. The symbols on the altar seemed to come alive, shifting and rearranging themselves. The forest around him seemed to darken, and a cold wind began to blow through the clearing. Elias's heart pounded as he realized that something was awakening, something ancient and powerful. The book had warned of such occurrences, but he had hoped he would never experience them firsthand. He grabbed the stone and the book, preparing to leave the clearing. The tremors continued, and the wind howled louder, making it difficult to think. As he turned to leave, he noticed movement in the shadows at the edge of the clearing. Figures, barely visible but unmistakable, emerged from the darkness. They were cloaked in tattered robes, their faces hidden in shadow. Elias felt a surge of fear. These figures were not human, not entirely. Their presence was ghostly, their movements fluid and unnatural. One of the figures stepped forward, and Elias could see its face, or rather, the absence of it. It was a dark void, an empty space where a face should be. The figure raised a hand, and Elias felt an icy chill wash over him. The other figures followed, surrounding the altar, their presence exuding a sense of ancient, malevolent power. Elias knew he had to act quickly. The figures seemed to be drawn to the altar, to the stone and the book. He took a deep breath and sprinted toward the edge of the clearing, the eerie figures moving slowly but purposefully behind him. The wind howled in his ears, and the darkness seemed to press in around him. He ran through the forest, the stone's glow the only thing guiding him. The whispers from the cabin returned, growing louder and more insistent. He could feel the presence of the figures closing in, their energy palpable even through the darkness. Elias emerged from the forest into a small ravine, its walls steep and lined with jagged rocks. He could see the lights of the village in the distance, a beacon of safety and familiarity. He had to reach it, had to escape the ancient forces that pursued him. With renewed determination, Elias scrambled down the ravine, his legs burning with exhaustion. He could hear the figures growing fainter, their whispers fading as he neared the village. The stone's glow dimmed, and the wind calmed, as if the figures were being repelled by the proximity to the village. Finally, Elias reached the village's edge, stumbling into the familiar streets. The warmth and light of the village felt like a balm to his frayed nerves. He collapsed onto the ground, the stone and book still clutched tightly in his hands. The danger seemed to have receded, but he knew the forest's mysteries were far from over. He had returned to safety, but the stone and the book held secrets that needed to be uncovered. The ancient forces were still out there, and the forest had not yet revealed all its dark secrets. Elias knew that his journey was far from finished. The forest had only just begun to show its true nature, and he would need to delve deeper into its mysteries to uncover the truth. The village's secrets. Elias stumbled through the village streets, the familiar sights and sounds a welcome contrast to the oppressive darkness of the forest. The village, bathed in the warm glow of lanterns and hearth fires, felt like a sanctuary from the nightmarish experience he had just endured. Yet, despite the relief of returning to safety, a sense of unease lingered. He made his way to his modest cottage at the edge of the village. Inside, he carefully placed the stone and the book on his table, the dim light from a single lamp casting long shadows across the room. The village had not changed, but Elias had. The forest had left its mark on him, and the ancient forces he had encountered seemed to be drawing him deeper into their mystery. Elias's mind raced as he examined the book and the stone. The book's pages contained cryptic writings and illustrations that seemed to hint at rituals and entities connected to the stone. He had seen enough to know that the stone and the altar were connected to something far older and more dangerous than he had imagined. He needed answers, but where could he find them? As he pondered his next steps, he heard a knock at the door. Elias tensed, wondering who could be visiting him at this hour. He opened the door to find an elderly woman standing on his doorstep. She was dressed in simple clothes, her face lined with age and wisdom. Her eyes, however, were sharp and alert, as if she had seen much in our time. "Good evening," she said, her voice soft but firm. "I am Althea, the village healer. I heard you've been out in the woods. May I come in?" Elias nodded, stepping aside to let her in. He led her to the table where the book and the stone were laid out. Althea's eyes widened as she saw the artifacts. "I've been expecting you," she said, her tone carrying a weight of seriousness. "The forest has always held its secrets, and it seems it has chosen you to uncover them." Elias was taken aback. "How did you know about the forest?" "And about these?" he asked, indicating the book and the stone. Althea took a seat at the table and began to examine the stone with a practiced eye. The forest is ancient, and its magic is not easily ignored. The stone you found is a key, and the book is a guide to understanding it. But be wary, for the knowledge it holds is both powerful and dangerous. Elias sat down opposite her, feeling a mix of relief and apprehension. "What do you know about these items? How can I understand their true meaning?" Althea looked at him with a grave expression. "Many years ago, this village was connected to the forest in ways you may not fully understand. The forest is not just a place, it is a living entity with its own will and purpose. The stone and the book are remnants of an ancient pact made long ago between the villagers and the forest spirits." Elias listened intently as Althea continued. "The book you have is an account of the rituals and agreements made to ensure the forest's favor. The stone is a conduit, a link to the energies and entities that dwell within the forest. It seems that the forest has called upon you, perhaps because you have uncovered something it wants to keep hidden. Althea's words sent a shiver down Elias's spine. He had sensed that the forest was alive in some way, but hearing it confirmed was unsettling. What should I do next? How can I protect myself from the forces I've encountered? Althea sighed. There are protective wards and rituals that can help shield you from the darker aspects of the forest. But more importantly, you must understand the balance between the forest and the village. The forest has its own rules, and breaking them can have dire consequences. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small pouch filled with herbs and charms. These will help you in your journey. Use them wisely. The forest's spirits are not to be trifled with, and their anger can be swift and unforgiving. Elias accepted the pouch gratefully. Thank you, Althea. I'll do my best to heed your advice. As Althea prepared to leave, she turned to him with a final piece of advice. One more thing. There is an old legend about a hidden chamber deep within the forest, a place where the ancient spirits are said to dwell. If you seek answers, that may be the place to find them. But beware, the path to it is fraught with peril. With that, Althea departed, leaving Elias alone with his thoughts. The forest, it seemed, was calling him once more. The village was safe, but the mysteries of the forest were far from resolved. The hidden chamber Althea had mentioned intrigued him, and he felt a growing sense of urgency to uncover its secrets. The night passed slowly, with Elias unable to sleep. His thoughts were consumed by the forest and the stone's connection to the ancient spirits. By dawn, he had made up his mind. He would venture back into the forest, armed with Althea's protective charms and the knowledge he had gained. He packed his supplies, including the book and the stone, and set out toward the forest once more. The village receded behind him, and as he entered the woods, the familiar feeling of unease returned. The forest seemed even darker and more foreboding than before, as if it were waiting for him. Elias followed the path he had taken earlier, the stone's glow providing a faint light in the encroaching darkness. He hoped to find the hidden chamber Althea had mentioned, a place that might hold the answers he sought. But as he ventured deeper, he knew that the forest would not easily reveal its secrets. The journey ahead would be fraught with challenges, and he would need all his courage and wit to navigate the ancient magic that lay hidden within. The hidden chamber. Elias entered the forest with a renewed sense of determination, the protective charms and herbs from Althea tucked securely in his pack. The forest was quieter than before, the sounds of wildlife barely audible over the rustling of the trees. The stone's glow provided a faint, eerie light, casting long, flickering shadows that seemed to shift with every step he took. The path was less defined now, swallowed by the dense underbrush and tangled roots. Elias relied on the book's descriptions and the stone's faint light to guide him. The further he ventured, the more he felt the forest's ancient presence. It was as though the trees themselves were watching him, their gnarled branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. The legend of the hidden chamber weighed heavily on his mind. Althea had mentioned it as a place where the ancient spirits dwelled, a location that held the secrets of the forest. Elias had no idea where to start looking, but he was determined to find it. After several hours of navigating the increasingly dense forest, Elias came upon a small clearing he had not noticed before. In the center of the clearing was an ancient stone structure, partially obscured by creeping vines and moss. The structure was unlike anything he had seen. It resembled a series of stacked stones arranged in a circular pattern, with a large stone slab at the top. Elias approached the structure cautiously. The stone slab on top was engraved with symbols that matched those in the book. He felt a shiver of anticipation. This could be a clue to the hidden chamber. He examined the structure closely. The symbols on the stone slab were worn but still visible. They seemed to form a pattern, almost like a map or a guide. Elias took out the book and compared the symbols with those on the stone. The book described an ancient ritual to reveal hidden paths and chambers, but Elias had not yet attempted it. With a deep breath, Elias began to follow the ritual's instructions. He arranged the protective charms around the stone structure and placed the stone in the center of the slab. The book had indicated that the ritual required a specific sequence of symbols to be touched or activated. As Elias traced the symbols with his fingers, a low hum began to resonate through the ground. The stone slab grew warm to the touch, and the symbols began to glow faintly. The clearing was filled with an otherworldly light, and Elias felt a surge of energy coursing through him. He stepped back as the ground around the structure started to shift. The stones began to move, slowly and deliberately. The circular arrangement of stones opened up, revealing a narrow staircase leading downward. The passage was dimly lit by the stone's glow, and the air that emanated from it was cool and musty. Elias's heart raced with a mixture of excitement and trepidation. This was it, the entrance to the hidden chamber. He descended the stairs, each step echoing softly in the confined space. The staircase led to a large underground chamber, its walls adorned with ancient carvings and murals depicting scenes of rituals and offerings. The chamber was bathed in a soft, eerie light, and the air was thick with a sense of ancient power. In the center of the chamber was a raised stone platform, upon which rested a large, ornate chest. The chest was covered in intricate carvings that matched the symbols in the book and on the stone. Elias approached the chest with caution. It seemed to hum with a faint, rhythmic energy, as though it was alive. He took out the book and examined the illustrations of the chest and the symbols. The book suggested that the chest held the essence of the forest's magic, and unlocking it would require a specific ritual. Elias began to follow the instructions, aligning the symbols on the chest with those in the book. As he worked, the chamber seemed to come alive. The carvings on the walls glowed with a soft light, and the air was filled with a low, melodic hum. The energy in the chamber was palpable, and Elias could feel the forest's ancient power resonating through him. After several minutes of careful work, Elias completed the ritual. The chest slowly opened with a deep, resonant click, revealing its contents. Inside, he found an assortment of artifacts, ancient scrolls, glowing crystals, and a beautifully crafted amulet. The amulet was adorned with symbols that matched those on the stone and the chest. Elias picked up the amulet, feeling its cool, smooth surface against his skin. As he held it, he felt a surge of energy similar to that he had experienced with the stone. The amulet seemed to pulse with a life of its own, as though it was trying to communicate with him. He examined the scrolls next. They were written in a language he didn't recognize, but the illustrations depicted scenes of ancient rituals and interactions with forest spirits. The scrolls seemed to hold a wealth of knowledge about the forest's magic and its history. Elias knew he had found something significant, but he also felt a growing sense of urgency. The forest had been leading him here for a reason, and he needed to understand what he had uncovered. The amulet, in particular, seemed to be a key to unlocking more of the forest's secrets. As he gathered the artifacts, the chamber's energy shifted. The low hum grew louder, and the carvings on the walls began to glow more intensely. Elias felt a growing pressure, as though the chamber was responding to his presence. He knew it was time to leave before the energy became overwhelming. He carefully packed the scrolls and the amulet, making his way back up the staircase. As he emerged from the underground chamber, the clearing was bathed in the soft light of dawn. The forest seemed to have calmed, as though it was waiting for him to return. Elias made his way back to the village, the artifacts securely packed. The journey had been arduous, but he felt a sense of accomplishment. The hidden chamber had revealed crucial clues, and the amulet and scrolls held the promise of unlocking more of the forest's mysteries. He arrived at his cottage, exhausted but exhilarated. The village was peaceful, its inhabitants going about their daily routines. Elias knew that his quest was far from over. The artifacts he had discovered would provide valuable insights, but there was still much to learn about the forest and the ancient forces that governed it. He took a deep breath and prepared to delve into the scrolls and study the amulet. The forest's secrets were slowly being unveiled, and Elias was determined to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. The forest's heart. Elias spent the following days in his cottage, poring over the scrolls and studying the amulet he had found in the hidden chamber. The scrolls were a treasure trove of information, detailing ancient rituals, the history of the forest, and its spiritual entities. Each scroll was meticulously illustrated, showing scenes of ceremonies and interactions between humans and forest spirits. Elias took detailed notes, attempting to piece together the fragmented knowledge and understand the deeper connections between the forest's magic and his own quest. The amulet, however, was the most intriguing discovery. Its surface was covered in intricate symbols that matched those on the stone and the carvings in the hidden chamber. When Elias held it, he could feel a powerful energy emanating from it, a pulse that resonated with the forest's ancient power. The amulet seemed to be a key, a vital piece of the puzzle that could unlock further mysteries. One evening, as Elias was absorbed in his studies, he heard a knock on his door. He opened it to find Althea standing on the threshold, her expression grave. "Good evening, Elias," she said softly. "I've heard about your recent discoveries. The village is concerned about the changes in the forest." Elias invited her in, and they sat down at his table, the artifacts and scrolls spread out before them. "I've found a lot of information," Elias began. "The scrolls speak of ancient rituals and forest spirits. The amulet seems to be connected to the forest's magic." Althea examined the amulet with a critical eye. "The amulet is indeed powerful," she said. "It is said to be a conduit between the mortal realm and the spirit realm. Its energy can both protect and reveal, depending on how it is used." Elias nodded. "I feel like I'm getting closer to understanding the forest's true nature. But there's still so much that's unclear. The scrolls mention a heart of the forest, a place of great power where the forest's magic is concentrated. I believe this might be the key to unraveling the remaining mysteries." Althea's eyes widened slightly. "The heart of the forest is a legendary place. It is said to be the source of the forest's magic and the dwelling place of its most ancient spirits. Few have ever seen it, and those who have often do not return. If the scrolls speak of it, then it is indeed a place of great significance." Elias felt a sense of both excitement and trepidation. "How can I find it? The scrolls provide some clues, but they are vague. I need to understand more about its location and how to access it." Althea took a deep breath. Finding the heart of the forest is no small task. The forest has a will of its own and can be treacherous to those who seek to uncover its secrets. You must be prepared for trials and challenges that will test your resolve and your understanding of the forest's magic. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small, weathered map. This map was passed down through generations of village elders. It shows landmarks and ancient symbols that might help guide you. It is not complete, but it might be useful in your quest. Elias accepted the map, studying it closely. The map was filled with symbols and markings that seemed to correspond with some of the locations mentioned in the scrolls. It was a valuable tool, and he felt a renewed sense of purpose. "Thank you, Althea," Elias said. "I'll use this map to guide my search. I know that finding the heart of the forest will be challenging, but I am determined to uncover its secrets." Althea nodded. Remember, Elias, the forest's spirits are both guardians and tricksters. They will test you, and their intentions may not always be clear. Trust in your knowledge and in the protection of the charms I gave you." With a final nod of gratitude, Althea left, and Elias prepared for his journey. He packed the scrolls, the amulet, and the map, making sure he had all the necessary supplies. The forest awaited him, and he was ready to face whatever trials lay ahead. The next morning, Elias set out once more into the forest, the map in hand and the stone's faint glow guiding his way. The path was less distinct now, the underbrush thick and tangled. He relied on the map's landmarks and the amulet's energy to navigate through the dense forest. As he ventured deeper, the forest seemed to come alive with a heightened sense of energy. The trees were more densely packed, their branches forming a nearly impenetrable canopy. The air was thick with the scent of earth and the distant whisper of spirits. He followed the map's directions, using the landmarks to guide him. He encountered several strange phenomena along the way, glowing eyes peering through the darkness, shifting shadows that seemed to move independently, and occasional bursts of cold wind that made him shiver. Each experience tested his resolve, but he pressed on, driven by the knowledge that he was nearing the heart of the forest. After days of navigating through the forest's labyrinthine paths, Elias came upon a massive stone formation that matched one of the landmarks on the map. The formation was surrounded by ancient trees whose gnarled roots formed intricate patterns around the stones. The air was charged with a palpable energy, and Elias could feel the forest's magic growing stronger. He approached the stone formation and examined it closely. The stones were covered in ancient symbols, some of which matched those in the scrolls and on the amulet. He began to follow the instructions from the scrolls, using the amulet to channel the forest's energy and activate the symbols. As he worked, the stone formation began to glow with a soft, otherworldly light. The ground trembled slightly, and the symbols on the stones started to rearrange themselves, forming a pattern that seemed to open a hidden passage. Elias took a deep breath and stepped into the passage, which led him deeper into the heart of the forest. The air was cool and still, and the passage seemed to stretch on forever. He could feel the forest's magic growing stronger, and the sense of anticipation was almost overwhelming. Finally, the passage opened into a vast underground chamber. The chamber was filled with a soft, ethereal light that illuminated the walls, which were covered in intricate carvings and murals depicting the forest's history and its connection to the spirit realm. In the center of the chamber was a large, ornate pedestal upon which rested a crystalline orb, glowing with a brilliant light. Elias approached the pedestal, his heart racing with excitement and awe. The orb seemed to pulse with the very essence of the forest's magic, and the energy it radiated was both invigorating and humbling. He reached out to touch the orb, feeling a surge of power unlike anything he had experienced before. As his fingers brushed against the orb, a vision unfolded before him. He saw scenes of the forest's ancient past, its creation, and its relationship with the spirits that dwelled within. The vision revealed the forest's purpose as a guardian of balance between the mortal realm and the spirit realm. The orb was the heart of the forest, a source of immense power and a focal point for the forest's magic. Elias understood now that his quest was not just about uncovering secrets, but about restoring balance and harmony. The forest had chosen him to be its intermediary, to protect its ancient magic and ensure its continued existence. With a sense of clarity and resolve, Elias took the orb and the knowledge he had gained and prepared to leave the heart of the forest. The journey had been arduous, but it had revealed the forest's true nature and his role in its protection. As he emerged from the underground chamber and made his way back through the forest, Elias felt a profound connection to the land and its spirits. The forest's magic flowed through him, and he knew that he had been given a great responsibility. The village was a welcome sight as he returned, its peaceful ambience a stark contrast to the forest's enigmatic depths. Elias knew that his journey was far from over, but he was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The heart of the forest had revealed its secrets, and he was determined to honor the bond he had forged with the ancient magic. In the days that followed, Elias continued to study the scrolls and the artifacts he had discovered. The forest's mysteries were vast, and there was much still to learn. But with the heart of the forest's power and the guidance of the village's wisdom, he felt prepared to embrace his role as the guardian of the forest's magic. The forest had chosen him, and he would not fail in his duty to protect and preserve its ancient legacy. The journey had transformed him, and he knew that the true adventure was just beginning.